Hi guys, as promised, back with another video. Today right now I'm going to do a book that I've tried to read, or I've intended to read for years and years and years. Read the start of it at one point. I remember sitting in a library in Halifax reading it in an old edition and kind of being confused by it. But I finally did it on my vacation. So we're talking about the private memoirs and confessions of a justified sinner. It's written by James Hogg, published anonymously in 1824. So this James Hogg was friends with Wordsworth and all the publishing literary people at the time. He was a Scot, obviously. Well, obvious from once you've read the book. But so the book, I'm going to talk about the book in the singular, but really the two aspects of the title, private memoirs and confessions of a justified sinner, they're really two separate books, or two separate stories. Now, I mean, the title's very confusing because only the first part, I guess you call it the confessions, they're written in the third person, not by the putative author, whereas the second part is written in the first person. So the confessions are written in the first person, but memoirs and confessions, they both seem to be like, don't they seem to be like first person genres? But that's not the case here. So the first part, or the first half, is confusing, very like Gothic-y, and by Gothic I mean, not that it relies upon magic or anything like that, but there's an element of like the heavy place that unknowing, that anonymity plays. I mean, I'm looking for better words here, but it reminded me a lot of other Gothic works, in that the high place that mystery plays. Like, who is this unknown figure? Where do they come from? And what are they up to? So the book starts off, like the memoirs part, starts off very much like something like trying to think of a certain title here. Let me just look. Yeah, I'm thinking of The Castle of Otranto by Walpole that I think I've reviewed. I didn't enjoy that book, but I think I reviewed it. So it's got that feel, and like a Jane Eyre feel, like the unknown, the dark, the mysterious, dangerous, whatever, stranger or unknown person. So the story starts basically with a wedding, the wedding between a super religious woman and a lascivious, debaucherous lord. Okay, and the marriage is doomed from the start. She is a puritanical Calvinist. We're introduced to her. We're introduced to the minister, who has a great deal of influence over her. And the two don't get along. The married couples doesn't get along. And I suppose the only thing you need to know about, in terms of historical background or theological background, is the sort of knowledge of the extreme Calvinism, puritanical Calvinism of the time, and that's where we get the title Justified Sinner. Now, in extreme Calvinism is deterministic, so it's includes the idea that God creates people foreordaining their their salvation or damnation. So the main difference that other forms of Christianity, like Catholicism, for instance, have from that position, is that they exclude the idea that God creates people, certain people, individuals, with the specific idea of their damnation. So they're created to be damned. Okay, so that's certainly not other Christian denominations' approach to that topic. That's called double predestination. So people are predestined to heaven and predestined to hell. God creates specific individuals foreordaining that thing. Now, the extreme absurdity of that position, which certainly wasn't, I would say, wasn't Calvin's view, is that you can know whether you're saved or damned, and if you're saved, it doesn't matter what you do. So that's the justified sinner thing. So if you know you're saved, which how could you know? It doesn't matter what you do. You can do whatever you like. And this, of course, bleeds into the worst kind of, religious hypocrisy and so on that is conceivable. For a bit of a reference point, check out my review of the movie The Witch, which is very, Calvinistic, puritanical, predestinarian. Now, most mainline Christians believe in predestination, but they only believe in the one side of it. They can't believe that God would create a person with this specific intention of their damnation. So how does free will fit into this? God knows that they're going to be damned, but the difference is that he supplies grace, or the ability, in some sense of the word, for everyone to reach salvation. And of course, that grace is available through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So everybody has the possibility of salvation, but it doesn't mean that they're going to take that opportunity or whatever. It gets very hairy because if you say that people can prevent their damnation, they can't prevent it. Only Christ can prevent it. If you say that they can prevent their damnation, then you're saying that also they contribute to their salvation, which is also problematic from a theological point of view, because nobody can save themselves. Nobody can do the infinite thing that is to win God's favor. So that's where, for instance, Catholic theology would distinguish between different kinds of merit. And condign merit is the idea that the little bit you did, God says, well, that's good enough, right? And he pays the real price with the blood of Christ. So it's kind of like, when your kid smashes a TV, which costs $500, and they are willing to contribute their allowance for a week, which is like $5. So $5 to a $500 TV. So that's obviously theologically problematic too. But Catholicism and sort of mainline Lutheranism and so on have a more nuanced view of salvation, and that the whole idea of justification by works and blah 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 is much more nuanced, and you can't go into a situation, you can't end up in a situation where somebody who sins can be justified, right? You can't have a justified sinner like you can in this Scottish Calvinism, Presbyterianism. So, as I said, the first half, or the first part of the story, is told from the third person, and it's a story basically of the relationship between two brothers, so the two sons of the mother who's married at the start. Now, it's never revealed whether the two brothers have the same father. One supposition is that the minister is the father of the justified sinner, so the author of the second part, and not the Scottish lord. But that's never proven, that's never stated. That's one of the most interesting things about this book, is that there's so much room for interpretation and supposition. So that's the first part. It basically, this justified sinner, this self-righteous brother, who's the younger and maybe the son of the reverend, basically trying to create hardship for the older brother. And it's an interesting story, but it's not nearly as good as the second part. So the confessions in the first part, the justified sinner is reprehensible. He's completely irredeemable in the eyes of the reader. He's just egregiously bad, wicked, self-righteous, worst stereotype of the religious, self-righteous person. But in the second part, in the confessions, it's so very interesting how it's like you have these weird external things that are offensive in the first part, but then we get to see the inner workings of all these events in the mind of the justified sinner in the second part. We get to see what's going on inside of him. And this is when the book begins to take the feel of, like, for instance, Dostoevsky's The Double, or some of the weird stories of Gogol, or Fight Club. Remember that movie, Fight Club? Is this really happening? What is happening here? The most reasonable conclusion for a modern reader is to say that the justified sinner is schizophrenic, right? That's what we would say today. That this is this Fight Club, Tyler Durden situation where he's being led on by an imaginary friend or whatever. Is it an angel? Is it a devil? Is it a creature of his own imagination? But it's super interesting to see the other side. It's almost like, what if you got the chance to read, Hitler's memoirs, or Genghis Khan's memoirs, or something more mundane, like Jeffrey Dahmer or something, just to get in the mind of this person who's doing all these just awful things and thinking it's okay, and in fact even good. He's doing God's work. So I highly recommend this book. If you're not jibing with it, the first half, please persevere through that so you can get to the second part, and that's when it really takes on a lot of interest. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. And this James Hogg has written a few other books, but they are not very well known, and he mostly wrote poetry, apparently. So I'm going to keep my eyes open for him, and maybe I'll read something else of his in the future. I found him extremely interesting. And there you go, guys. Hopefully we'll be back with another video relatively soon. Thanks, guys.